you equally as experts as us. Just we would like to offer different set of perspectives into non-formal education and experiential learning. It will not be a full-on training, but it will be like a shower of theories, experiences, practical tools, and methodologies which you may use or which might inspire you to look a bit deeper into the non-formal education perspectives and hopefully implement them in your work and working with students and pupils. So I will present the panel very shortly because I know some of you have already received the bios. I don't know if we could have the full panel on the view so people can see them. Okay. So our first speaker will be Balint Yosha, who is Director of United for Intercultural Action. Balint works in the non-governmental sector since he's allowed to work, and he has a main political science with a special focus on civic society. He has worked as educational program coordinator and intercultural trainer for his organization for over 12 years and managed over 300 national and over 100 international trainings and worked on many projects. And in his work, he uses tools such as activism, gamification, volunteer programs, forum theater, and online tools to empower marginalized groups and youth. And currently working as a full-time director in the Hungarian office of United. Our second speaker will be Richard Francis Ape. He's the co-founder of Edu for Future and consultant and humanity consulting. After his bachelor's degree in computer science in Nigeria, Richard spent several years of his life to volunteer in youth non-governmental organizations at different levels of responsibility. He was last posted in Paris for 4 years, where he coordinated strategic planning and international projects. He's also a former International Secretary General of International Youth Catholic Students and Secretary for Youth Liaison Committee of UNESCO NGOs. Then our third speaker is Dr. Farooq Sullivan, who's professor, assistant professor at the Department of Liberal Arts at the National University Lahore. Farooq has a PhD in development studies and a master's in global and post-national communications at SOAS, University of London. And he's an author of Media and Imperialism in India and Pakistan, and has co-edited several books. In the past, he has worked as a journalist with Pakistani and Swedish broadsheets, besides contributing to a number of international media outlets. And last but not least is Indra, who's the head of Inconvenient Films class and a human rights educator. She's an expert in youth policy and formal and non-formal education, and she has been working directly with children of all ages, youth, NGOs, communities, decision makers, and representatives of the interdepartmental sector for more than 10 years. Indra has a master's degree in theater and performing arts, and her work seeks to combine human rights and cultural education, critical thinking, emotional intelligence development, and solidarity. So as you see, our panelists here come from different fields, including non-governmental organizations, academia, activism, and some are former or current teachers and lecturers themselves. So I hope you will enjoy our short interventions, and then we will invite you for a Q&A session where we can exchange experiences and perhaps answer any questions that you may have. So as the first speaker, I would like to invite Balint to set the framework and share some insights on the non-formal education.
Thank you very much. Salam alaikum. Greetings from Hungary, a quite far away country for you. What I wanted to do first is just really, as Naringa said, to level the floor, to talk a little bit about the concepts you're gonna hear more about. So my presentation is about non-formal education, and sometimes this sounds very academic or high level, but actually experiential learning, which is part of non-formal education, is how we grow up. So when we are children, no one is really educating us in a frontal way. We just pick up things, try to smell on them, test them, how they taste like, and then we recognize, okay, this is fire, so I shouldn't touch it anymore, and this is cucumber, which is tasty. So this is already the beginning of our life is non-formal education. But later in life, when our intellectual capacity grows, we need to memorize things and understand more complex ideas, such as mathematics or biology. And for that, frontal education is often a good tool, but it has a lot of limitations. And one of the biggest limitation is the personalization of education, meaning that a frontal educator has limits on how many teachers hour can he or she spend on one pupil. In the power of non-formal education is that it can be personalized to need, it can be tackle competencies in a more direct way, and it has multiple layers of tools and concepts that can help actually people to grow in their own pace, meaning that their own speed, how to learn, and also it uses more interactive methods, and by that keeps the motivation of the students higher. In our courses, when we organize non-formal educational courses, the people want to be part of the education. And what I see on my own children, and especially on youth, they are not really wanting to be part of frontal education. So the concepts are very simple. I try to give you one very clear overview. What are the differences? So formal education happens in an educational institution. Of course, nowadays it can be also a Zoom meeting, but still the institutional framework is clear. Who is the teacher, how long it goes, what are the concepts we want to tackle, and how much curriculum can be done in certain time, and also at the end of it, mostly there is some sort of qualification, a diploma, a certificate, some paper that you get. And then we have informal education, which is basically what you learn, how you learn how to get to school, how you learn how to cook, everyday situation in a life. It can be in a group, it can be a parent children type of education. But anyway, there is no qualification after that. And it is teaching you everyday things in life. And then we have non-formal education, where the location is out of school. It can be, of course, in a school building, but the setting itself is not frontal. So we often have a chair that is rounded in a circle. Sometimes people are sitting on the floor. You can walk around. It's not compulsory, so you can leave the room. So it gives you more freedom to learn, and it doesn't give you a certification. And for non-formal educational types, we could have 100 different names for similar things. I listed basically my favorites, or the ones that I encountered and used, where we talk about experience-based learning. For example, when we do a pottery class and everybody sits in front of a pottery machine and clay and can build something, this is like experience-based learning. Then education by sports. Via sport, you can even teach history. You can teach basically anything, also including values and human rights. Here, the sport is just a tool, so it's not the main goal. But by doing some sort of physical activity, you also can understand these concepts and methods that I mentioned. And then we have human rights education. Simply put, this is non-formal education with the intention to teach about human rights. Then we have youth work, social education. We have a lot of intercultural and sensitivity trainings, when we also have a purpose that the people who meet there also learn more about each other's sensitivities and cultures. Then we have the human resources department in many countries, employment work. Here we talk about how to behave in a labor environment. And then we have environmental education, which is about the climate change. And here we talk a lot about plants and animals and their rights and the complexity of the globe. And of course, empowerment training, where we actually look for a specialized minority, for example, migrant women in Europe, and then we try to help them how to empower themselves and take their rights, what they deserve. And of course, community work, which is usually done in a family or communities, where we talk, for example, about the Roma community in Hungary. We have a huge population of Roma community. And then we have to look the whole community as a holistic thing and try to teach people how to make this community work better. So this was, as I said, a very short introduction. Later on, we will have some Q&A. So if you are more interested in one of the methods, and I also know that my colleagues will share a little bit about them. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Balen, for this overview. I think even now I feel that I understand informal education better. Now I would like to invite Richard to share about key elements of transformative pedagogy.
Thank you very much, Neringa. Just give me a second. I'm going to try to share my screen. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of problem with that, but this is the problem when we have a lot of things open on our screen.
I think Yuda is about to share it as well.
Okay, great. Then it's better from his end then. Yeah, so thank you very much for the invitation to be part of these sessions and to share with you about some key elements on how we can foster experiential learning and non-formal education. As Belen just mentioned, the importance of non-formal education and how it fosters how to live in society or how to integrate in society and to be part of even the learning experience that you acquire. One of the famous statements that we have in my home country, Nigeria, is experience is the best teacher. The problem with this statement is that some of this kind of experience is not something that is strongly valorized in the current educational system that we have in the formal sector, that most times people are considered as just recipients of knowledge, but not really those who participate in the learning experience, bringing their different realities into the knowledge or into the knowledge acquiring process. So the teacher is the one who knows it all and is able to give the knowledge to the student. Therefore, the student has to sit there and just receive them. But in the experiential learning and non-formal education, we consider students as equally important knowledge bringers, those who bring from their different realities and experiences and the things that life teaches them into the lessons that they learn, and how they help other participants in the learning process also acquire those life experiences. And this is not just something that is based on acquiring a specific technical knowledge to be able to become an engineer, a doctor, or something, but giving you life skills that help you integrate and become problem solvers and part of the solutions to the issues that your society face or your society is going to face in the future. And this is why it is very powerful that we bring this element whenever we talk about formation, both in the formal and non-formal sector. My idea is to see how we can integrate this experiential and non-formal education approach in the formal education sector, because the formal education sector is supposed to form the learner, encourage characters and learning and the knowledge. But then we focus on the knowledge part, we touch on the characteristic or the character part. And how can this become a way that we use that space of learning as a way to build individuals that not only transform themselves, but becomes people who transform the society which they live in. So I wanted to quickly share with you an element that was developed by an organization called Arigato International in collaboration with UNESCO, which is the United Nations Agency for Education, Science, and Culture, which talks about transformative pedagogy or transformative education. So when we talk about transformative education, what does it mean? How can we reinforce this in a learning environment? With the process is more like looking at people, like I mentioned just earlier. How do we transform the individual, not just one person, but then the one person who is transformed can become part of the solutions to transform his or her society. So in order to help these learners who come with their different realities and learnings and experiences to integrate those experiences into the learnings, the new learnings that they're acquiring, but also help others to learn from those experiences, there are 6 elements that would help us to reinforce those aspects. One is context sensitivity. How context sensitive is the educational program or the learning program that we propose to learners? Context sensitivity here also looks at what is the context of the individual learners. Each learners come from different contexts, different realities. How do we integrate those different realities and contexts and the social issues that they face in their community or in their family? Not just to learn about those realities, but also use those realities as part of the dialogue, as part of the learning process, that what shapes the learning that happen in the classes or in the places of learning that we create. The second one is about safe learning environment. How do we create a safe learning environment for the learners? Safety here is not talking in terms of physical safety alone, but in terms of the social emotional support that we can give to the individuals that are learning, how we support the different issues that they are facing and give them enough space to express themselves, that we valorize the knowledge that they bring, we valorize the opinions that they share, and use those opinions to shape the conversation around us, that people are not judged by the knowledge that they bring, but then those knowledge are used as elements for conversations and issues. So we need to foster that in every learning environment that we have, both in the formal and non-formal setting. The third element will be the participatory and collaborative learning. As I mentioned earlier, each learners come into the learning experience with some kind of background knowledge, with some kind of competencies. So how do we reinforce those competencies that they bring? How do we create that space for them to participate in the learning experience that we are giving? So it's the opportunity that we create, giving that space that they are freely able to express themselves, or are we also creating that space that they can work together with other learners? So which kind of opportunity you create that makes the learners to begin to collaborate on solutions with their co-learners in the classrooms or in the learning environment, as I would always say. The fourth element is a whole school approach. We are not bringing a knowledge-based element that is based on one class issues alone. We cannot be saying, okay, this is the only thing we teach in the class, and all in the other aspect of the school, the processes are not reinforced. If you are teaching about respect and diversity in class, we have to be able to replicate that in the whole school and in the whole community. So how do we integrate also the different stakeholders that are collaborating with the schools, but also in the community where the schools or the learning is happening, so that the learnings that people take from those learning spaces are able to integrate in the society where they find themselves. So this is about identifying stakeholders, different institutions that you are going to work with, so that when the knowledge that the people acquire needs to be applied in society, they would have the backings and the institutional support to help them put to action those solutions that they want to propose. Role modeling is another element that I would like to highlight. Role modeling here is not just talking about the best people in society, people who are good, who knows everything, but also modeling the failures and the vulnerabilities that exist in society, because these are essential elements of life. So non-formal education is able to support people, provide this kind of role modeling aspect that people learn both about successes and about failure, and how to accept and to transition from those failures and vulnerability into something more powerful. And the last one would be the supporting learners-led action, which means that when the learners through the collaborative effort and opportunities that you create, are able to propose solutions in society. You create the enabling environment that they can insert those solutions that they bring, that they can also contribute to the society. If these 6 elements are reinforced in the learning spaces, both in the school, formal education setting, but also in the different organizational programs that you organize, I'm sure you are able to transform the individuals, because you give them that space to explore their knowledge further, and then to contribute to transforming their own society. Of course, there are a lot of other approaches that we can use to reinforce each of these elements. But as Naringa said, this is only a highlight of the sections. We can go in more details into how each of these elements can be reinforced in our current programs, but also in new programs that we can develop. So I will leave it here for now, and I'm happy to take questions or comment or anything that you would like to learn further. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Richard, for the presentation and sharing all these elements of transformative pedagogy. I'm sure it would be quite a task for all of us to try and implement all of them, but I think it gives quite some food for thought. Right now, I would like to invite Farooq, who will bring his background from journalism and academia to speak to us about education and criticality.
Thank you, Naringa. Really honored to be part of this panel. Assalamu alaikum to friends in Indonesia. I have my experiences. I had my schooling in Pakistan, and then I've lived in Sweden. Right now I'm speaking from Stockholm. I live in Stockholm, work in Pakistan, and I did my master's degree, PhD from London. So I have a bit different kind of experiences. So what I'll speak today will be built on these experiences, of course, besides the academic research and whatever theories that are there. But I'll try to be very brief, given the time frame. I'll speak about 3 things. What is criticality? Secondly, what are the conditions? What are the prerequisites for criticality? And finally, what is the importance of criticality? Why do we need criticality? So, criticality, it's usually very, common word we use very often, especially nowadays. Every journalist, every writer claims to be critical. And when you read their books or works, you hardly find any criticality there. So what is criticality? I think there are at least 3 basic things when you are critical or when you apply criticality. First of all, you have to be argumentative. Your viewpoint, or in case of teachers, your education, it should be built on arguments, and we should teach the students, we should help the students learn how to build an argument. And I think this is the last thing we do in Pakistan and many third world countries. We usually use education as indoctrination because of the nature of the states we live in. Right now, there is a huge debate going on in Pakistan where the present government is trying to Talibanize the education. We are using the term in Pakistan, Talibanization of education. This was a process we had in Pakistan in 1980s, and the present government is, accelerating it further. Anyway, second thing, it's the ability, criticality is the ability to see the difference between form and essence. For instance, I use the example of this paper. Well, apparently this is a paper. But if we are critical, we should be immediately able to see that, look, this is also climate. This is also labor. This is perhaps also gender, whether we had women labor or men's labor, whether the labor was paid according to the law and human standards or not. So this ability to establish the difference between form and essence is the second key element in criticality. And thirdly, the approach should be holistic. We should be able to see things in their totality, not just, that this is paper. We should be able to see, okay, if it is a paper, where the trees were cut, in Sweden or in Brazil, and all these kind of things, as I just stated. So what are the conditions for criticality? What are the prerequisites we need to have for being, in the context of formal or informal education? First of all, it should be democratic, as Bulant earlier pointed out as well. Although given the framework and setup we are right now working, it's not very democratic, perhaps, as Bulant again pointed out. But anyway, in a whatever way possible, we should be able to make to democratize it and achieve some sort of equality between the so-called teacher and the students. Secondly, the students should not be treated as objects. They should be subjects. They should be able to exercise their agency. And that again is linked to the first point I raised, our democratization as well. And finally, I think it is important to have in mind whether we are applying student perspective or student's perspective. That is to say, if it is student perspective, it is the teacher deciding, the so-called teacher deciding what the students should learn, what the learners should learn, whether we are into formal, informal education or non-formal education. And students' perspective is what students want to learn. It doesn't mean that you stick by students. If it's a first grade student and he or she doesn't want to learn anything about mathematics, well, we need to understand that. Or maybe we are talking about secondary school students or higher school students, maybe university students. Well, yes, we need to understand that why this student is not interested in mathematics or say in history. And then we not only get him or her interested, but we take it forward. So that kind of perspective is always very important in any kind of education system or learning system. Finally, and I think most importantly, what we can achieve with criticality. What should be the outcome of criticality? Well, from an intellectual and scholarly viewpoint, the most important thing is that criticality helps achieve the learners, the students, certain kind of competencies. They are able to develop intellectual competence. They are able to develop social competence. They are able to develop emotional competence, which are very important. And as Richard pointed out earlier, the aim of education should be transformative, especially in the context of third world countries, Indonesia, Nigeria, Pakistan, all countries with huge populations and many commonalities right now and even perhaps previously. So how we can use education for transformation? That's how we can use criticality. And finally, before I finish my intervention, I want to say one more thing, especially when we are talking with the people who gonna organize the education. I think criticality also teaches us creativity. And usually when we are in the third world context, complaining about lack of resources, which is very genuine complaint. I'm not saying that this is not genuine. However, if we have creativity, we are able to use whatever sources or lack of sources even, we can use them in a creative manner and still we can be critical. We do not have to be rich to be critical. We have to be creative. So that should be the main take-home point, I would say, from this small intervention. Thank you very much. I hope I was abiding by the time, Naringa.
Brilliant. Thank you, Farooq, for this philosophical perspective even on criticality and contributing to the panel. Right now, I would like to invite Indra, who is our human rights educator, to share some practical examples of non-formal education and how it can be applied.
Hello, everyone. I would like to say good morning because in Lithuania it's 9:30 in the morning right now, and I know that in your country is almost lunchtime or lunchtime already. What I'm going to present, I will try to give you 3 tools that I am using myself in different kind of events, formal and non-formal events, in formal education and in non-formal education as well. So with teachers and with educators or youth workers. But before, let me try to share my screen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not sure how it works. Okay, it's not working, so I will try to talk. 5 to 7 minutes. First tool that I would like to present you is Living Library. It's a tool that works pretty easy and works in a way that library works. Just that books are real human beings representing different kind of vulnerable groups, mostly. And this tool was created in 2003 by one youth organization in Denmark when they were invited in music festival, one of the biggest music festival in Denmark, and they were asked to give a workshop against that would be talking against stereotypes, against racism, and so on. So they were thinking, okay, we can give a workshop that wouldn't be that strong, or we can invite those vulnerable groups and let them talk with the people that would come to our workshop. This is what they do. This is what they did. They invited those vulnerable groups and they asked them to talk about their reality, about their experience, about their life, about stereotypes that they are facing every day or in their lives in general. And this is how Living Library was born, how it works. You, as a reader, come to the place and understanding that most of the viewers now and listeners are teachers. So let's say you have Living Library in school. So your pupils are coming to Living Library and there is already place prepared. And there is a counter for the librarian with the catalog of living books that you have invited to participate in Living Library and share their experience. And the pupil comes to the library, to the librarian, and takes the catalog and chooses. And those books can be different kind of people that are facing stereotypes, as I already said, or prejudices in their daily life. So let's say the pupil chooses vegetarian or vegan, because could be that that person, the pupil, has a lot of stereotypes about vegans. or they have never met a vegan person and they would like to talk. Then librarian brings the pupil as a reader to the book and gives them space from 10 to half an hour to talk eye to eye to each other. And in this way, a vegan book is sharing their life or their experience, why they are vegan, what is the veganism, and people also can ask. Thank you. Someone is sharing already. How does it look? So this is how it works. I have done it not only in schools, because schools are inviting also living library, but also it can be done in different kind of events, such as festivals, as I already mentioned. It could be done in the central square of the city, and so on and so on. Then my next tool that I am using is, as already Neringa mentioned, that I'm graduated in theater. So my favorite topic or my favorite method of the theater is social theater. That is called, the one that I'm using is called Theater of Oppressed. And it was created by one director, Augusto Boal, in Brazil, 50 years ago, even more, I guess. And it was created for change. And Theater of Oppressed, actually, it's a principle of theater, and then there are different kind of methodologies. One of the methodologies that I like the most is Theater of Oppressed, and Balint already mentioned Theater of Oppressed, and I have done forum theater in school and how it worked. Actually, I can share one example, and it was Month Against Bullying. And with a group of pupils, we have actually explored few different kind of stories that happened in that school related to bullying. And then those pupils created a play, really short, 7 minutes play, that they wanted to show the situation that had happened. And in theater, in forum theater, there are no spectators. Everyone participates. By this, I mean that those pupils who created the play, they showed the play that they created. And then after that, they repeated a play. And we have invited pupils who were sitting all around from the school, but were not participating in the play, to come to participate. So when the pupils saw that there is a situation that might change all the bullying in the play that is currently being showed, the pupil stops the play, comes to the stage, and change one of the actors. And then the play continues and the pupil improvise. And the play stops when the situation when the situation is clear and when no bullying is happening in the play. Then my third tool that I'm using is documentary films. And in Lithuania, we have one platform that is really powerful, in my opinion. We have different kind of documentaries that are, most of them are related to human rights. And those documentaries are short documentaries prepared for pupils and for schools, and also for different kind of educators. And they are free of charge. So all the teachers can use them. Unfortunately, it's only in Lithuania. It works only in Lithuania because of the license. And experts, for every documentary, experts prepared methodological tools for teachers to take it and use it after documentaries. So it works in a way that teachers can include documentary in their lessons. And also, of course, it can be different, following different kind of topics, and not only history, English, or I don't know, physics, and so on and so on. But documentaries that I am using are usually for the empathy, also for discussions, for emotional literacy, for also tackling different kind of topics related to human rights, as I already mentioned. Even it could be used for conflict management if there is a conflict in a class, and for the group building. So yeah, it was hard actually without my presentation because I already had it. But thank you for someone who was showing the visuals.
Thank you, Indra, for sharing these practical examples. We will also be able to gather the resources and share it with participants attending, so they can look more in depth. We have heard about different tools and perspectives that teachers who are interested in transformative pedagogy and supportive their students in becoming more empathic, aware, critical, and active citizens that they can use in their own life and work. So I wanted to give one question to all panelists is how do you challenge yourself to become a better educator? If you can share how this process looks for you, or do you feel that at some point you do reach the point where you're the perfect educator or teacher, and then from then on it's just about experience sharing? So whoever would like to go first, make a sign or just unmute yourself.
Yeah, if I may, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so I changed my equipment, so you see me in a different form now. Yeah, I think one of the role of educators is to be facilitators of learning and not the best in the field. So as educators, it's like beginning to see ourselves in a horizontal level with our student. Of course, we bring more experiences and some knowledge in terms of competencies, but also helping creating that space to facilitate critical thinking, as the professor has earlier mentioned, and giving that space for dialogue is important. So how as we as ourselves can enter into that space and create that enabling environment to help that conversation to happen around the critical issues that people face in their society and how they are becoming part of the solution is important. So as educators, I think one important thing is to see yourself as a facilitator of learning. A second element which I didn't mention is what we call a learning process. A learning process is how learning occurs within the classroom or within the learning space. So how do we foster that space? What kind of motivation do we create for students to motivate them to get interested in the topic and to further explore that topic? So because if we create an activity, maybe some kind of
I think we lost Richard for a second, but we did receive his perspective on the viewing ourselves on a horizontal level. I don't know if the other panelists agree, or is it something you would challenge, or just share your take on this?
Yeah, sorry, I lost it for a moment, but just to conclude, so those kind of motivations that we create to help students to be able to explore further, to bring in the different experiences that they have into the conversation and use those experiences in the learning space to create dialogue and to discover new feats of knowledge is important. So thinking of those learning process, creating this motivation is very important for educators, and to help the learners also enter into this critical thinking space that the professor mentioned just earlier. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. I think we're on the same page on that.
So if I may, I just make a quick one. So basically how I challenge myself, like I don't believe that anyone can get to a level where there is no room for improvement. So my method is that even if I like a method, I always try to adopt it to the audience and never do it the same way again and again. And I also challenge myself by going into trainings as a volunteer trainer for organizations that I don't even know, just to get into like a completely different situation, and also to learn. So basically, I never stop learning, going into trainings and learning new methods and testing them out on different pupils. And basically, this can refresh your knowledge. And basically, every training is a little bit different, so I never get bored of it. That's my method.
Thank you for this perspective, Balint.
Can I? I guess what is very important for me is to reflect and evaluate my work, and also what I'm doing, how I'm doing, how do I feel myself in doing one or another thing. So what helps me, it actually intervisions. It's another method that I'm doing with my colleagues or someone who's in the same field. And how does it work? It works that usually we are taking cases from different kind of educations or different kind of workshops, and also we are kind of scanning. I'm talking about myself and I'm scanning myself. How was it? How did it make me feel? Also, I'm having individual and group supervisions that. It's a bit different from intervisions, because in intervision, group is as a tool. Let's say we are using the experience of the group and of the participants that are in intervision, and in supervision, it's you. It works in a way as a therapy, but it's more related to the job topics, let's say, or to the things that you are doing. So this also helps me to scan and to reflect and to evaluate, where do I want to go? How am I going there? Is it okay for me? And is it okay for everyone who's around me?
Thank you, Indra. Farooq, do you have any thoughts on this, or do you agree or disagree?
Well, I can narrate my personal experiences. I think Indra pointed out very important thing, self-criticality. But it is at least what I try to do to improve my teaching skills, all the time learning new things, intellectually improve ourselves, new methods in everything possible. And finally, in my case, I think especially when you are in academia, you're rather privileged in a third world context, I think. My effort is all the time to link my education to social responsibility. And I teach at a sort of elite university where privileged people come, often pretty spoiled as well. I try to link my education to trade unions, gender questions, climate questions, which these people usually do not relate to being very privileged in Pakistan. I mean, they are usually the ones who destroy the environment and climate in Pakistan. Still, they don't know because this is never pointed out. I try to link it with peasant struggles. Pakistan is an agrarian country largely, and peasants have no rights. So these kind of efforts, I think they are important, and all the time to be yourself part of the society rather than isolating yourself from everyday struggles. That's at least my way of dealing with it.
Thank you for the input, Farooq. I would challenge you though on the challenges experienced by educators. I think they're different in each region, whether the north, south, east, west. And I think what we got from all of you is that being an educator and teacher is a lifelong learning process, which is both inspiring and tricky. So right now, I would like to invite Yuda just to give a short recap and summary. You have quite a challenge there, but I'm sure you're an expert in giving the key insights. So.
Okay, thank you, Neringa, and also thank you for all of the speaker. And the best, I think this is really good insight for all of you here to give like a new perspective that non-formal education can also support the formal education. So I'm gonna conclude in Indonesia, of course, and because basically all of the teacher are from Indonesia, so I'm gonna translate. I'm gonna conclude in Indonesian. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu. Jadi ada beberapa hal yang mungkin saya buat kesimpulan dari beberapa topik yang sudah disampaikan oleh speakers kita dari berbagai negara yang memang tergabung dalam non-profit organization NGO yang ada di Eropa. Yang pertama adalah tentang non-formal education yang disampaikan bahwa pendidikan virtual dapat memudahkan batas dengan cara ada beberapa metode yang sangat interaktif yang telah diaplikasikan. Lalu ada beberapa macam pendidikan yang disampaikan oleh Mr. Balin Josa, yaitu ada pendidikan formal, informal, dan non-formal. Dan non-formal dapat diterapkan di mana saja, bahkan pada pendidikan formal dan informal. Dapat mendukung kegiatan formal dan informal. Lalu ada beberapa juga yang telah disampaikan oleh speaker kita tentang key element transformative pedagogy, yaitu pentingnya non-formal education dalam integrasi dalam dunia sosial. Lalu belajar berdasarkan pengalaman, partisipasi, dan kolaborasi. Lalu yang ketiga adalah role model dari orang yang mempunyai peran penting dalam pembelajaran, khususnya untuk orang dewasa dapat berperan sebagai role model untuk para peserta didik atau anak-anak. Lalu poin selanjutnya dari Dr. Farooq, yaitu tentang criticality, yaitu tentang bagaimana kemampuan untuk membentuk rasa ingin tahu dan mengemukakan pendapat. Lalu membantu siswa untuk dapat berargumen, jadi kita mendorong bagaimana siswa dapat membangun critical thinking, yang mana itu sangat berhubungan dengan kreativitas. Lalu dapat kritikal ini juga dibangun justru untuk membantu meningkatkan kompetensi siswa, terutama dalam pembelajaran yang berintegrasi, yang berintegrasi dengan materi-materi lainnya. Lalu yang terakhir dari Dr. Farooq, yaitu criticality juga membantu dalam membangun hal-hal baru, inovasi yang dapat menjadi nilai baru untuk siswa tersebut. Lalu selanjutnya yang saya ingin sampaikan dari Miss Indre yang tadi, ada beberapa hal metodologi atau strategi atau tools yang digunakan dalam penerapan non-formal education tadi, itu adalah adanya living library, yaitu ada orang atau seorang manusia atau seorang guru yang hadir menjadi perpustakaan hidup. Jadi disebut living library, dan ini menurut saya sangat unik, dapat mengajak ke siswa untuk berinteraksi satu sama lain dan menjadikan perpustakaan yang biasanya buku ini menjadi sesuatu yang unik, yang baru, karena kehadiran seorang guru menjadi perpustakaan ini menjadi sesuatu yang unik. Lalu yang kedua, adanya kegiatan bermain bersama dengan beberapa rekan di suatu event, bermain peran dan bertukar peran, yang mana itu juga menjadi sesuatu hal yang membuat mereka saling berinteraksi dan bersosialisasi. Lalu yang ketiga adalah dokumenter film yang diadakan secara gratis juga untuk guru dapat menjadi pelajaran terkait, jadi mengambil pelajaran value ya dari film-film dokumenter yang memang disajikan oleh para guru. Jadi ini kesimpulan sementara yang bisa saya simpulkan, walau masih ada beberapa yang missing karena memang kita belum menggunakan tools translation yang bagus. Jadi ini saya hanya mencoba menyimpulkan beberapa hal yang disampaikan oleh para speaker kita. Silakan Bapak Ibu tanyakan atau ingin gali lebih lanjut menggunakan bahasa Indonesia dan saya akan coba translatekan dalam bahasa Inggris. So I'm gonna go back to Neringa. Thank you, Neringa. So we can open the question and session. And I think on the comment we can see some of the question that we can respond. So go back to Neringa.
Yes, thank you for the summary and the recap. We trust it was accurate. I cannot see the question myself. Can you? So we're now opening the floor in case there are any questions or experiences you'd like to share.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a first question. And second one, about combining teaching methods in non-formal education. And if you can post the first question again, maybe you in the chat. So because I think
no, I think this is the first one.
It's a second one.
Okay, I can read. Non-formal education needs to have an impact on social intelligence. In experiential learning, is there the best model that can be applied?
Okay, Indra, do you want to answer since you have read it?
Maybe there are some colleagues that would like to jump in first.
Yeah, I would just like to jump in a little quick. I mean, I usually talk of good practices. Of course, there are a lot of approaches that we can apply. But I think one of the most important things is the aspect of collaborations and participation. And this collaboration and participation help people bringing the different social elements and social realities that they live in. And so if we're able to integrate this in the learning process, even in the different subjects, it doesn't have to be on civic education alone. It can even be in mathematics. How can mathematical knowledge, logic, and algorithms that we learn in class, how can it be applied in real-life situation? What is the ethical implications of those knowledge, and how can those knowledge transform the ethical issues in society? So I think it's this participatory approach that we create and the opportunity for the learners to collaborate on the learning experiences is very essential and can help in integrating or bringing non-formal approach into the formal sector. I would leave it there.
Just one extra sentence. So for me, it's also important that the word best is not really applicable because there are always different audiences and always different methods, and you can always combine them. And on the spot, what you do is always the best possible. So that is not the best. But what is important here is this peer-to-peer logic as well. So that in a frontal education, there is a teacher and there are students. In non-formal, we are a learning group. We are developing things together. And in that, the students basically have the same role as the teacher. So that is the peer-to-peer logic in a non-formal educational method. And every method that we use, you need to include the participants' knowledge and then create like a multiplier thing when actually the teacher is asking good questions, brings up topics, and then the pupils themselves can answer the questions with the help, with the facilitation of the trainer. So it's not that the education is coming only from one side, but it's a circle. It's not a triangle or any other shape.
Thank you, Valen. Also for this metaphor of circle and not a triangle. Anyone else feels called to fit into this particular question from the panel, or do we feel that we have covered? Yeah, Indra feels like that. Okay, then we have a challenging one. how to build critical thinking when the students are even too shy to ask a question. So how do we encourage students to be active and dare to criticize or question some of the things in the mainstream discourse? Who would like to tackle it first? I know it's not an easy one, but yeah, Richard?
Yeah, thank you again, Aringa. One of the last statements I mentioned when you posed the question earlier was about the learning process and how do we stimulate or motivate people, the learner, and give them the desire to want to explore new feats of knowledge. And being able to stimulate critical thinking can go through the same process, that when we create that motivation and offer the spaces for them to explore, it could be through games, it could be through singing, it could be through poem, simple things that students will not consider doing probably in class. Bring those elements into the classroom and create that a space for them to begin to challenge certain perceptions that they have, certain questions that they have, certain opinions that they share, and create a conversation around those questions. I think that can begin to stimulate some kind of criticality, questionings, and responses within the peers or within the learning circle, as Balint has mentioned. So those learning process, I think it's an important element to consider.
Thank you, Richard.
Naringa, may I very briefly?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Now, I mean, this is always very difficult to answer this kind of questions. But in general, it depends on the context. And the biggest challenge, I think, whatever level of education you are engaged in, school, secondary school, college, university, and formal, nor formal, whatever settings that are there, I think the key challenge is to help unlearn. The challenge is not to make somebody learn, but unlearn. And that's always very, the impossible job. When you're not talking, when you're not expressing yourself, this is also something you have learned, that, okay, don't say things if you gonna look stupid at the end. This is usually the family learning. We learn from, our parents, our elder siblings, or grandparents, whatever kind of family system we have. So the challenge is always to help them unlearn. And we need to be vigilant to understand, and that we can do by understanding our audience. And of course, all the time, how to learn new skills. As I and Plant and other colleagues Indra also pointed out, how to learn new skills so that we help them unlearn and unlearn ourselves as well.
Thank you, Farooq, for this input, and also noting that there are many things we have to unlearn ourselves, not only the students. Yeah, Indra?
Can I? Actually, usually when I hear when someone is saying, okay, he's too shy to ask, or she cannot ask, I'm always asking why. What is the atmosphere in the class or in the place where the learning is happening or should be happening, and why the person is not able to ask? Because everyone is, everyone is able to ask. Everyone is able to give their opinion. Everyone is able to answer. So in my opinion, it's very important to understand that in order to give a space for questions and for answering and for learning process to happen, there has to be created safe space to do that. Because we as adults, we already learned a lot of things probably, or unlearned, as Professor mentioned. But youngsters, children, they are already going through that process. They have to understand how to do it, and they have to feel safe to do it. They have to feel safe to do mistakes, to learn from the mistakes. They have to do to feel safe to reflect on what is happening around them. You know, they have to feel safe to criticize or to give feedback and to receive feedback as well. You know, not in the angry way, but in a way of learning. You know, so safe space is very important to create in a class, within the classmates, within the peers. And also, I guess it's very important to create that trust-based relationship with an educator or teacher. You know, the teacher should understand and give this understanding to the pupils that, you know, we are equals. We are not like, you know, one is higher and another one is lower, but we are equal human beings, and we can talk to each other as like equals. You know, it's not that you will be punished because you did a mistake. It's that I will help you to understand what happened and to reflect what to do next. You know, I will be here to support you. And even if the question starts with or not even the question, but reaction from the pupil starts, I don't know, that's okay, because might be that after 10 I don't know, and with your support that, okay, that's okay not to know, because all of us, we are human beings, 11th one will be the question that you were waiting for, like, you know, 10 times ago. So I guess the relationship and the space, the atmosphere, and the trust and the support are very, very important in educational process in order to learn and to unlearn, to be able to unlearn. So yeah.
Thank you, Indra. Balen?
Yes, so I also wanted to highlight the so-called learning atmosphere. So this is done by my colleagues. I would add this approachability from the teacher. So like to break down some barriers, to not have a frontal position in the class. So to elaborate the fact that this is now a different surrounding, different method. This is always important. Gestures, symbolic gestures of breaking down the barriers are important. But the second one is a practical one, which are methods. So we have a lot of books, tons of material available on different type of methods that can help this to happen. So basically, they are really like a recipe where it is told you how to do it, what you need to prepare, what are the steps to take care of, and which encourage critical thinking. These are like exercises or games that I summarize as methods that can be used by anyone, basically, with a little bit of non-formal ability and understanding. It's easy. And you asked me, Neringa, about the difference between non-formal and informal education. So the answer is very clear. It's the topic is one important difference. So in informal learning, informal education, you learn about everyday issues, how to drive a car, how to make a meal, how to get to the school faster, learning about everyday things. And in non-formal education, you learn about complicated, sometimes even philosophical topics, just like environment, democracy, human rights. So this is the key difference. And the other one is that in informal learning, the place of learning can be anywhere. It's a spontaneous thing often. It is learning by doing things. So if you learn about food, then you learn it in the kitchen. If you learn about driving, you learn it in your parents' car or your friend's car. But when it comes to non-formal education, we do have often a classroom setting, but a place, a dedicated, let's call it safe, but also learning space, which is dedicated for the non-formal activities. So it is not a random spot. These are the two like very clear differences. So the topic and the setting is very different. Thank you.
Thank you, Balint. And I see one of the comments saying, well, for all of you, thank you very much for explanation, really broadened my point of view. Right now, I would like to invite Yuda just to come and shortly recap some of the answers, and then maybe we'll take one or two more questions, and then we will conclude.
Okay, thank you, Neringa. So let me conclude some of the response from the speaker in Indonesia, of course. Mungkin untuk menjawab pertanyaan dari Bu Dewi Apriliana yang telah disampaikan bagaimana tadi membangun critical thinking, dan ketika siswa itu sulit atau malu bertanya, ada beberapa mungkin triks atau tips ya, memberikan stimulus atau motivasi apabila siswa terlalu malu untuk bertanya. Jadi selalu diberikan stimulus, lalu diberikan challenge agar mereka mengekspresikan diri mereka. Jadi itu bukan hal yang dianggap lumrah, artinya mereka perlu digali dan perlu dibuka ruang untuk mereka mengembangkan diri termasuk critical thinking mereka. Lalu perlu diketahui tentang why they get shy, kenapa mereka malu, itu perlu juga dicari tahu dengan beberapa alasan untuk menentukan treatment atau strategi yang perlu kita lakukan. Karena biasanya ada juga karena atmosfer di kelas tersebut yang mendesain sedemikian rupa menjadi tantangan tersendiri untuk siswa dalam melakukan critical thinking misalnya. Dan jadi sangat penting juga membangun atau memberikan space untuk siswa bertanya. Jadi space-nya dibuka selebar-lebarnya dan dibuka seperti kemudahan-kemudahan untuk siswa bertanya. Dan apabila memang terjadi sesuatu kendala disebabkan oleh sesuatu hal, siswa menjadi malu dan lain-lain, itu perlu diselesaikan. Dan yang terakhir adanya bentuk elaborasi metode belajar dalam kelas. Jadi mengelaborasikan sesuatu dalam kelas yang membuat siswa tersebut dapat meminimalisir atau mengeliminasi sikap malu atau critical thinking yang membelenggu siswa tersebut. Mungkin itu sekian dari saya. Saya akan kembalikan ke Miss Neringa. Go ahead, Neringa.
Thank you. I will take the final question from the audience, which is, what does unlearn really mean? Does it have anything to do with relearning from a different perspective? So perhaps we could have a few of our experts clarify or bring in their insight into this.
Should I?
Sure.
Okay, when I say unlearn, it's the following. Usually school education, almost all over the world, it's indoctrination, it's not education, it lacks criticality. Then a lot of things we learn from family in the informal or however you describe it. We learn from our society through mosque, church, whatever. That's indoctrination, that's not critical. So by unlearning, we means going critical. And once you are able to communicate to the students what criticality is, and it's not just communication, it's cultivation. The real challenge is to cultivate criticality. Once you are able to achieve that level where the student has been cultivated to apply criticality, you are in the process of unlearning. How to do it, when to do it, that's always a challenging thing. Because one teacher is perhaps teaching you criticality. The other is not teaching you criticality, it's rather teaching you status quo. So there are a lot of things come into play. The state you are working in, the education system you are working in, and all that. But I still, even as an individual, you can play a role. You can at least disturb the status quo. And that's also unlearning in itself, disturbing the status quo. So I would say two things. Criticality is unlearning, and disturbing the status quo, that is unlearning.
Thank you, Farooq. That is quite comprehensive overview. Do any of the other panelists want to add on to this specific question? No? Okay, we feel that that we have covered it. Thank you so much. I would now like to close the Q&A, and thank for the audience for all these very kind of even challenging questions, and us thinking and discussing together. For the final round of input, I would like our panelists just to share one key message or takeaway you would like to share with the world and fellow educators. I know it's a tricky one, but feel free to improvise and be random with it.
I'm ready.
Can you hear me?
Okay, go.
But yeah, Richard, go.
Okay. Yeah, I have internet connection, so I was speaking earlier, but you couldn't hear me. Just as a final statement, I will also want to add to Professor Farooq's contribution about how to unlearn. I think it's important. We all come into the learning space with our specific stereotypes that are shaped by our own social reality, be the facilitators or the educator or the learner, and creating that spaces for dialogue to unpack those stereotypes and be able to dialogue around those stereotypes can help us unlearn some of the stereotypes that we have. And I think a long formal learning spaces can create enough of those opportunities. And to conclude, as I said earlier, education is to transform the individual, but not just transforming the individual, it also gives him or her the capacity to contribute to transforming society. And I think it's important that we put this at an individual level, but also transforming the society. So it has to go in a two-way level, that those who are transformed are giving also the capacity to contribute to transforming their own society and their own social reality. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Naringa.
Thank you, Richard, for this final thought and also very inspirational one.
Should I go ahead?
Sure.
Okay, this was very unexpected and challenging question. It took me a while to answer it. And I think I've been doing it already. I do two things a lot. I always start my lecture with a very happy music. That's one technique I use to put students at ease. All of a sudden they become happy, they are friendly. Second thing, I use a lot of poetry in my teaching. That helps, I think, learn a lot of things and unlearn a lot of things, because what poets can achieve, academics and intellectuals cannot.
Brilliant. Thank you, Farooq.
So mine would be to listen to children, because actually children learn much more till the age of 6 than we learn anything after. Walking, singing, talking, these are much more complicated than mathematics and biology. And also how they teach each other their own songs, the games they play, by showing example, by being patient, by listening to the other. This is how I observe education also, and try to mix up the things that I learned with that, how children teach each other. And this is my way of educating, and also taking care of that everyone is educated. So look at your children.
Thank you, Balint. Indra, do you feel called to kind of wrap with the final statement?
Yeah, I actually wanted to share one of the main sentences from Living Library, which sounds, never judge the book from its cover. So I wish everyone, all the teachers, not to judge their pupils as well, because we never know from what kind of background they are coming. We never know what kind of traumas they are bringing with them, what kind of experience they have, and so on. But also, I want to point to the teachers as well. don't be afraid to say that you don't know. This is because that you don't know, and that you have feelings, and also to show those feelings. I know sometimes it's hard, but it's one of the best ways, in my opinion, to build that trust-based relationship, which is needed to lead the quality-based educational process, let's say, and not only educational process within the school framework, but educational process in growing up, let's say, because you are those who are leading those students, those pupils, young people, and kids to the grown-up life. That's all from me.
Thank you, Indra, for noting this big responsibility that the educators have. So I would like to thank for all of our excellent panelists, some of which were rising extremely early today to be here with us. And thank you to the fellow educators and our participants for taking the time to join us in our discussion on how we can be better educators, professionals, and I guess human beings overall. So with this, I would like to handle the mic back to Yuda for the final recap and closing.
Okay, thank you, Neringa. So we can go to the conclusion of this material today for this meeting. And I think this is not only sharing like knowledge or something, but this is also like sharing the best practice of all of the speakers today. And personally, I would like to say thank you for all of the speaker, and maybe we can go to the recap. I'm gonna try to recap for this event. Jadi Bapak Ibu, dari speaker kita yang tadi telah disampaikan bahwa ini tidak hanya sekedar membagikan insight dari mereka, tapi mereka juga memberikan best practice yang pernah mereka lakukan di dunia pendidikan. Dan pesan mereka yang bisa saya simpulkan bahwa sangat penting untuk mentransformasi society atau bertransformasi dalam pendidikan. Lalu belajar banyak hal, perlu belajar banyak hal, tidak hanya di satu bidang saja, tapi hal-hal sosial yang justru menjadi hal yang biasanya kita abaikan, itu juga menjadi hal yang sangat penting dalam membangun pendidikan, dalam membangun kapasitas diri. Lalu juga never judge book by its cover. Kita tidak tahu tentang background setiap seseorang, artinya jangan pernah menjudge. Ajarkan anak-anak kita untuk menjadi orang yang mungkin lebih sosial dan lebih menghargai orang lain. Jangan pernah takut untuk mencoba hal baru, dan jangan takut untuk selalu bertumbuh, karena kita adalah makhluk yang dinamis. Itu yang bisa saya simpulkan dari kelima speaker kita hari ini. Saya ucapkan terima kasih. I also want to say really or maybe super thanks to all of the speaker today, and hopefully we can collaborate again in another event. And of course, because you are from abroad, you are from mostly from Europe, so basically we are from Indonesia, also really open for the collaboration or cooperation, of course, for education. So before I close to this event, I would like to say sorry if I maybe missing some of the point when translating, or maybe conclude all of your statement or your message, because maybe we need to find another tool that can provide translation tools on maybe below on the screen, something like that. We need to figure out for that. Oke, saya ucapkan terima kasih Bapak Ibu untuk partisipasinya hari ini. Saya ucapkan terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely day.